Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I'm Mr. Forest, and this week I have a conversation with Jeff Kober. Jeff's a very cool dude. He was introduced to me by Rada, and I mean, honestly, if I had to sum him up, I'd say he's an artist. But he has many skills. He's a professional actor, has been for a long time. You might have seen him out there. He's a meditation teacher, a photographer. He was a musician. I'm assuming he still is. Once a musician, always a musician, and many other things. But we got in some really wonderful conversations about consciousness and meditation and art. He's just got a great energy, and I know that you're going to enjoy this conversation. Today is November 1st, if you're listening to this in real time, and today's the first day, the beginning of the East Forest Ceremony Tour, U.S. West in the United States. Tonight we are in Boulder, Colorado. It is sold out. A few more dates are sold out, but all the stops continue through Salt Lake and Boise, Vancouver, Canada, Seattle, Portland, down to Nevada City, San Francisco, Santa Cruz, Los Angeles, over to Vegas, down to San Diego, over to Phoenix, Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Austin, Texas to end on November 20th. So check it out and really appreciate this is it's happening now. So thank you for helping spread the word, doing some little postings. And of course, thank you so much to everyone who's purchased a ticket and for your support. I'm very excited to share this series with you. It's really a dream come true. So thank you so much. And I also want to say thanks to our Patreon, patreon.com/East Forest. That is a way to support this podcast and to support the project in general. Lots of little private, exclusive goodies we do over there. That's patreon.com/East Forest. And also journeyspace.com is a place where we offer online facilitation. We're going to be doing some more of those online journeys soon. We have many other things, like mechanisms of support, from private journeys to a guidance music library of mine. It's a platform I co-founded, journeyspace.com. See if that is interesting to you and useful. The world is a wild place, and we all can use some repose and reflection and good conversation to keep ourselves grounded and sane. And, if I remember there was this little YouTube video, it was like a minute, and it was the Dalai Lama, His Holiness. And it said something like, the meaning and purpose of life. So why wouldn't you click on it, right? And he essentially is saying that the purpose of life is experience. And that rings true for me, because in all of its shapes and forms, that's what we're here to do. And in order to do it with richness, we stay here in the now, we stay present, we stay witnessing, we stay loving, we stay breathing. Less about our projections of the future and our thoughts or perhaps regrets of the past. But we're here for that experience. So I'm here for it with you, and we're here for it together. And with that, we're going to get into all things experience and richness in life with our new friend, Jeff Kober. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. It's good to finally be able to do this. I know. Actually, I think one of the first times we were going to talk, it was COVID on your side with production or something. So it's just been...
It was, yeah.
The COVID dance that we've been doing together.
You and me and the rest of the world, yeah.
Yeah, right. As if we're special. Yes, everybody, man. It's really disrupted the music industry, as you can imagine. I'm assuming it was massively disruptive for production of acting stuff and films and TV.
Well, it changed the face of it. Having to test regularly and be cleared to work, and then having to I've been off and on this soap opera for a couple of years, and my COVID job actually.
Which one is that?
General Hospital.
Okay, I'll tell you my soap story when you're done.
Okay. And the first time we went back to work, soap, to begin with, you don't really rehearse. It's sort of like doing live theater without rehearsal, and they have 4 cameras, and you do it once, and then you move on. It's just as horrifying for an actor, But and you get one rehearsal. You rehearse just before you shoot, and we had to do those with masks on. So you're like
Oh,
talking through a mask and looking at someone, and it just and then the masks come off, and then you're basically doing the scene for the first time, but they're taping it.
that's
So
just weird. Yeah.
it's so weird.
It'd be weird to be in rehearsal with a mask. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and because especially with acting, it's like you're already assuming certain things to make it feel as if you're in a real circumstance,
Yeah.
and able somehow to incorporate / ignore the fact that there are cameras chasing you around.
Yeah.
And then you add one more level of and ignore this too, and your whole system goes like, no, that's too much.
Too
It's
much.
too much.
Well, and that's not something you're used to. It's like, why am I wearing like this strange artifice? Like we're doing the thing I've done, but I've got this mask on. It just probably throw you a bit. And then you take it off. I don't know. It's just strange.
But it was, it's we are, as humans, we are infinitely adaptable, because now
That's
it's
for
just
sure.
like, oh yeah, here we go, this is it,
Yeah.
this is what we're doing. What, you were on a soap? What happened?
Well, little known fact, I used to be an actor. So I mean, I went to college and was really into acting and music, but acting was sort of like took the lead. And I went to graduate school for acting and then spent my 20s, almost 10 years doing that whole thing.
Wow.
So I did a little work on soaps, yes. But my story is just sort of thinking about like, you go into these auditions and you think about the parts that got away or the parts you got and how that changes your life
Mm-hmm.
or didn't. And there was a part on I think it was As the World Turns was the New York show that I was going out for, I believe. And
Uh-huh.
I remember there was this part of this character called Laser that basically was just like a bad guy, but it was going to be like I don't know what they call it. I forget now. Like it's a job. Like you're there for like years.
So
Whatever.
it was a regular, like a
Yeah, it
series
was like a
regular.
big part. And I got pretty close along the way. And I just remember, and this is a long time ago, early on in my career. And I just think, like, what if I had gotten that? And then I was like, and I worked a couple days on soap. So I know a tiny bit about what you're talking about, how, like, you start early, it's a job. The crew's been there for 30 years. The lights are like dusty because they haven't moved. They're just lighting the same side. I remember the room, like the studio on the Upper West Side, was like, wow, this shit has just stayed put for a long time. They've just moved the sets around, but the lights are stuck in time.
It's it's fascinating because you go in there and yeah, you can, if you're, it would be easy to just fall in with the status quo. And like Jeannie Francis is someone I was worked with quite a bit on the show, and she's been on it for 40 years.
Wow.
She was
What's
she
so
was the
wild?
Laura of Luke and Laura, and and so she's had the same job and the same plot lines come along and come
Oh,
and
yeah.
go, and but I'm not smart enough or talented enough to know how to. I tried to act like I thought soap opera actors act. I did it. I did it one day and just went, "Oh, I'll never do that again." So then I just go in and I just do my thing, and it's fun because it's like everyone there is ready and willing to play as soon as someone says, "Let's play," and they
Hmm.
just, "Oh, okay," and so it everyone comes to life when you come to life. So it was
Mm.
I had so much fun doing it, and I'm still doing it. I'm working next week there.
Well, it is kind of hard though, like you're talking about, in the sense that, like, I don't know, soap operas are kind of a trope in society, or like, I don't know, like but when you get there and you have to do the job, it's like any other acting job. You have to act well, like you're doing your best, like,
Yeah.
and like you said, there's less preparation and things are moving quickly. And if you're a day player or something, like everyone else It's just they're very familiar. You're just trying to slot in and like who's who, what are we doing? Like that is pressure, you know? I mean, honestly, it's not that different on other TV shows. You don't have a lot of rehearsal, and I mean, I had to play something on Law and Order, and like I remember I was a bad guy, and I shaved my head at one point because I was losing my hair. So now I was just like the bad guy, or whatever.
Right.
I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
That was that, or a gay. I was gay or bad, and the gay parts were far more fun, believe me,
Oh,
and
man.
rich. But the bad guy parts were stupid. And the script at the audition, it was a mentally challenged person who shoots these people, and that's the start of the show. And so I did that at the audition and got the part. Show up to work weeks later, or whatever. We shoot the scene where I kill the people, and after I shoot it, I remember like the assistant director or something comes up to me. He's like, "Oh, by the way, you're not mentally challenged anymore in the script. That's not part." It's like,
my God.
"Oh, that's awkward."
They didn't tell you that?
No, they didn't care. Like, we just need you to shoot these people so we can get film this, get the story going, and it just reminded me. It's so like embarrassing in a sense. You're trying to like do your best, and it's like, oh, I just need to like pull this trigger and play dead. And it was always such a strange experience. Some of those jobs. I remember that job. I lost my voice. I got laryngitis, which is that's a nightmare. Which doesn't happen to me. I was like, I could not speak, and luckily, the only thing I had to do that week was come in and play dead on one of the things, like be a dead person in the morgue. Didn't have to speak. It worked perfectly.
Brilliant. I love it.
Yeah. So I'm sure. I don't know. I have some sympathy for. I'm sure you've been through many, many paces with acting over the years and had some
I'll tell
incredible
you,
experiences. And
acting is the single most profound spiritual exercise I've ever been engaged in, and it keeps food on the table, because you've got to be willing to be vulnerable, be willing to look like an idiot,
yeah,
and be willing to own a point of view without knowing if anyone's going to approve of it or not.
yeah.
All those things
You
at
definitely
once.
have to be open to embarrassing yourself and opening yourself up. Like, I haven't done this now in 10, 15 years. So I actually like haven't done that really. Like I remember what that was like, where you're just always feeling that like, wow, all right, I'm going to find this part of myself that, man, I don't want to go there. I haven't been there. I know that's a part of all of us, but here we go.
And I sure don't want
it.
anyone else to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, then you
absolutely.
have to do it in front of other people. Yeah, I mean,
It's embarrassing.
over and over again. But how do you find that to be a spiritual practice for you? Tell me more about that.
Well, I think one of the real challenges of living a life based in spiritual principles is to, accept our humanity,
Mm-hmm.
and then to live as if we're worthy of being alive, and to treat each other as if others are worthy of being alive as well, even if they're behaving like idiots, even if they have perspectives and opinions other than our own, even if they're behaving badly, to recognize that the different ways of being a human are not infinite, but they're many numbered, and the truth of us is infinity, and oneness, spirit. So to find the way of allowing myself to express fully without me judging it, and without me looking at it through your eyes to judge it from there, that's a spiritual practice. That's, and all of us, no one gets into acting unless they want attention. And most of the people who want attention from acting can't stand having attention. So, you're walking in there with these two things happening. And, if you're an actor, then you also have something that wants to express through you.
Right.
And so I just said all of those things in the impersonal, but when you're starting out, you don't have them in the impersonal, you have them in the personal. I don't want you to see me. Please see me. I have something to say. And the fact is, I don't have anything to say, but something has something to say through me. So finding the way of allowing ourselves to that. One of my theories of life and spirituality is that it's my job to be a channel rather than to think I know what any situation needs, to engage deeply within myself and then be willing to let it come out the way it wants to come out. And good acting is the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So life acting, there's precious little difference other than, like acting is just real life, but usually a heightened circumstance. Very few of us have that many heightened circumstances in our
Right,
actual
exactly. Yeah.
lives.
Like you get an opportunity as an actor to actually play around with embodying all these colors of humanity that for a lot of us we either never get to or rarely do, certainly. And you're just kind of getting to embody it and play pretend and explore and see what that feels like in your body. And it's a wild experience.
Yeah.
And maybe in some ways it really does give you more compassion for, like you said, humanity, like what we all, this weird thing we all have to go through, these identities we get lost in. And when you're an actor, you're constantly finding those edges and just like, I wonder what is your imagination? What would it feel like to be full of rage? Or what
Yeah.
would it feel like to be a fool? Whatever it is.
Well, those are two that I've definitely encountered and embodied and excelled at, rage and foolishness. So
I was just bad guys and homosexual pretty much was my excelling. But I excelled.
uh,
Well, so tell me a bit about, like, has that been a through line for you for work, or where and how did the mindfulness and the spirituality become a big part of who you are?
I started looking for spiritual solutions to what was ailing me way back in my early 20s, I think. Because I was troubled. I was in a really dark place for a long time, and so I was looking for spiritual solutions, but they were not readily apparent to me at the time. And there was,
Mm.
we look at what's available now in terms of you know variously called self-help, spiritual communities. Wisdom being presented on the internet or in books, or the capacity to the ease with which you can travel to India and talk to people who are spiritual masters, and that wasn't available. And I was looking and looking and looking, so I was trying to meditate for a long time, um, and trying to find a connection to source, I guess you would call it. And back, this was like 40 years ago. I took a class in science of mind. Learning how to do science of mind kind of prayer, where you're not demanding that the universe give you things, but you're manifesting. You're saying this is the way things are, and
Mm.
um, like that, and just and studying the I Ching, and learning various ways of meditation that worked a little bit or not at all, but I still did them. Um, this for I was like the meditation that I teach today, Vedic meditation. I'd been meditating daily for over 20 years before I learned that, um, and it, and all of that is not that meditation didn't do anything for me, but uh, those other forms of meditation didn't really pay off until I had the experience that I had with Vedic meditation, where I actually was able to have the experience of transcendence, have the experience of experiencing myself, life, consciousness as something other than my head filled with thoughts and my opinions and my ideas of myself or the world or to have that transcendent experience of source of consciousness itself. Once I had that, then mindfulness, vipassana, sitting and observing your thoughts, all those things, then they made more sense because I knew that I wasn't trying to do something with all of that. Rather, I was, those are all practices of not doing anything with all of
Mm-hmm.
that. But I had to have the experience of knowing myself as that place of not doing before any of that made sense. I just listened to Dan Harris was talking about, the use of plant medicine, and he was making the point that until he had the experience with, I don't know if it was psilocybin or ayahuasca or what it was, but until he had that experience of pure freedom, he didn't know what meditation was about. Once he had that, then he knew what meditation was about. And I had kind of the same experience with transcendence, which I learned 20 years ago, like 20 and a half years ago, something like that.
What is it about Vedic meditation, though, do you think that is different or unlocked that feeling for you? Because when the analogy of like a psychedelic peak experience, it makes a lot of sense to me. Like, I also felt that a few of those experiences sort of gave me a felt experience and showed me a possibility. Then other things made a lot more sense, like books and concepts. I was like, oh, okay.
Well, the meditation I was doing before Vedic meditation was there were different ways that I was trying to control the mind, control the way I was using the mind, controlling where I was placing my attention, controlling what I was doing with my attention, um, and but it was all the mind, all the intellect. Vedic meditation allowed me to have the experience of what I am that is other than the intellect. And it was like there was a book uh, called by Franklin Merrill Wolff, and he wrote two books that were seminal for me. One of them was The Philosophy of Consciousness Without an Object. And that's what the transcendent is. There's consciousness here, but there are no thoughts, or the thoughts are very subtle and slight. There's consciousness here, but it's not consciousness of I am a body. It's simply the I am. And that I am is, it's variously described as the ground state or the witness self. It's that thing that I know was there when I was 6 years old, looking out at my family, and when I was 25 years old, hitchhiking around the country, and when I was, 40 years old, whatever I was doing then, and when I was 48 years old, and I learned this practice of Vedic meditation. It's that, that is actually, it's not just a thing that happens here and there where I get to see beyond the veils. It's actually the truth of me. And instead of seeing beyond the veils, I am that thing that is beyond the veils.
Right.
And once I have that experience, even if I have it and then I'm no longer in it, I know it's there, and I know it's not somewhere other than where I am. I know it's instead, it's exactly where I am. And what I realized after years of doing this meditation is that at that moment when I learned Vedic meditation, I stopped being a seeker, but I became even more of a student, because I was no longer looking for the truth, because there is no objective truth out there that is greater than the subjective truth of I am. Once I know that subjective truth of I am as something that is felt, that is other than a theory, then everything can be looked at through that lens. Like we look at what's going on in the world. How can there be a God if all of this is going on in the world? Well, this is the outpicturing of the ego. It's very clear. These are people who are, these are the behaviors of the ego. And well, what if or those thoughts in my head that tell me I'm not worthy of life or of happiness or of love? Well, wait a second. If consciousness is the truth of me and consciousness is the truth of life, and there's no separation between me and you, between me and anything, how can these thoughts of, and this aspect of that oneness isn't worthy of life, how can that be possibly be true? It
Mm-hmm.
can't. So from that one experience, then all else can be extrapolated from it. All else can blossom from the planting of that seed. And then as you go forward, you become more and more grounded in that underlying truth rather than simply hitting it here and there. You become grounded in it, so that when you're grounded in it, then your system can do whatever it does. You can go through fear, terror, anguish, sorrow, pain, joy. You're still there. And like we said just before we started, how are you doing? I said, well, it depends on what paradigm you're using to ask that question. And from the paradigm of spirit, I'm always doing fantastically well. From the paradigm of emotionality or vulnerability, that there's different days with different feelings, but I'm always really doing well. So that's a really long answer to
That's
your
great.
question.
I love it. Would you say then, like the Vedic experience that for you was more of an uncovering and unveiling versus an arrival?
Yeah,
Like it's not a reaching; it's
absolutely.
more of a the fog goes away. It's like what is.
Yeah, it's a settling down to the the place of pure being. Um, the Beatles song "Across the Universe." Uh, Lennon wrote that after learning transcendental meditation, and it's the chorus is "Jai Guru Deva." Nothing's going to change my world. And I was like, what does that mean? Nothing's going to change my world. And it's the no thing, that place of no thingness, that place of pure being.
Yeah.
That's what changes my world. And, when I teach people meditation, I tell them, if you do this twice a day for a year, your experience of life will be absolutely transformed by that 1 year of practice. And I say that very specifically, your experience of life, because your life may look exactly the same. It can't possibly after a year, but it can seem as if not much has changed from the outside, but your experience of what is will have changed absolutely, because of the experience twice daily of allowing yourself to settle into that place, or uh, some partial experience of that place, and the consequent rolling out of your system of all these stresses that keep us from having that experience. Because that one of the metaphors that is used to describe consciousness from the Vedic perspective is the ocean, that there is an ocean of pure being, and then there are waves upon that ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And that meditation, Vedic meditation, allows that wave of activity to de-excite so that we can start to feel that ocean that is underneath. There's no place at which ocean ceases being ocean and becomes wave. It's ocean all the way up and all the way down. And yet you and I are experiencing ourselves as separate and different and non-oceanic at the moment. We're individuality. But what keeps us from being able to experience ourselves as ocean, even as we're having the wave experience, are these traumas and stresses and these marks left on us by life and by our, by the survival experiences that we've had and the emotional experiences that we've had. And meditation allows those trapped energies to roll out of us so that we become more and more clear channels for that underlying feeling of the truth of us, that underlying feeling of pure being.
I was talking to Bob Thurman, the Buddhist scholar, and he had this really great way of translating in I guess in I don't know, Tibetan, Sanskrit, the word mindfulness. He thought a better way to translate that is remembering. And I was like, that's fascinating.
Remembering that truth, that underlying
Just the
truth.
word is more like remembering is a better, he thinks, translation, like literally. And
Wow.
and that kind of blew my mind because it's sort of like remembering you're the ocean, right? Or as opposed to I see the ocean, I'm mindful of it. No, it's like
Yeah.
remembering what is. What
Oh my
that's how I
God. I
see it.
love that. Thank you. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and it
He's
just
something, isn't he? Bob Thurman? Oh
he's a
my
trip.
God.
He's a trip because he's kind of like this big joyful. I don't mean this in a pejorative way, like a muppet, you know, in a good way. Like he's just he's just a bound of energy. You just want to be around it, and it's
Wow.
fun.
Uh-huh.
And we got to the end of the conversation, and I said, "Are you hopeful?" And he put his head down. He says, "I'm miserable." I said, "You're miserable?" He says, "Yeah." It's like, you know, all the things going on in the world. And it says, I talk myself into joy. I talk myself into joy. But I was like, it was so vulnerable to just give a glimmer of that humanity, of like
Wow.
the misery. And I'm like, of all the people, I'm like, sure don't seem miserable from the outside. And you have so much skill and knowledge and experience and practice. But that was a gift in itself of just sharing, like, even if he is joyful, you can have these mixtures of feelings all at once, like experiencing the misery of it all
Well,
while being the
and
ocean.
and yes, and knowing that it's all a part of it, and that just because uh, life is worth living does not mean that life is going to go on much longer than
Mm.
the next year or so, uh,
Uh,
because of everything we've done to every aspect of life here on the planet.
I mean, at the end of the day, it just is this grand play of contradictions to be conscious, to be alive. Like you're saying, like the world will never not be tumultuous. If anything, it'll probably just get more tumultuous. And yet, like when I ask you how you're doing, it's like, well, that always is there. Like the wind is creating waves, so to speak, or whatever it is. And the ocean is the ocean.
Yeah.
And that's life. You know,
Well,
like,
and Pema Chodron says, "You are the sky. All the rest of this is just the weather."
right, exactly. And for me at least, some of those peak experiences that I've had allow me to believe that and understand that. And still, you know, the last couple days ago, I got back and I was trying to get ready for this tour, and it's really stressful. And I was just like, I'm at a 9. I'm just, oh my God, I'm so feeling so stressed, and I can see it, but I can't stop it. At the same time, I have to let that
Mm.
fire, like in a way, it has to burn. I guess there's things I can do to not throw gas on the fire, but sometimes I don't always feel like I'm the director of this play as much as I'd like to be. Sometimes I feel like at best I'm like a gaffer or like a assistant lighting designer.
I, I feel your pain, man. And
I'm not unique.
well, you're absolutely unique, and we have a lot of shared experience. The anxiety is a really important thing to talk about, and I cannot tell you how many people I know who just take anxiety as a given, myself included. Up until a few years ago, I was in anxiety literally all the time, and just there were times when it was lessened slightly, but almost all the time I would be in anxiety. Definitely every time I had to engage with anyone or anything other than my own small world. And I think it has to do, for me, it has to do with a couple of different things. And one of the biggest things that it had to do with for me was, I think we get we have these belief systems that have been built in from when we were kids, that if we let ourselves feel how much rage there is, or how much terror there is, or how much sorrow there is, those are the big ones for me, I'll die.
Mm.
And so the anxiety is like keeping myself up from those feelings.
Mm.
Like if I let myself fall into the sorrow, then it's endless, and it will drown me. There's some, whether I know I have that belief system or not, it's in there, and so then the anxiety is just keeping myself up out of it. Also, wanting to make sure that I'm not seen in the world the way I see myself. So, like if I, like I had this rage in me that when this therapist walked me up to the edge of it and had me look at it, it was like, that is so ugly. I would never, ever have been able to look at that and own that myself without thinking that I was just worthy of like death. And but once I saw it and it then was allowed to flow out of me by unlocking it, then it was like, yeah, that was in there. And now that it's gone, then there's no longer the anxiety of keeping myself from, from feeling it, from owning it, from knowing that it's there.
That's an interesting idea. Like anxiety is like a symptom of trying to keep things in check.
Of trying to keep something interior in check. It's not about controlling the world out here, other than through the way it sees me in some fashion. But it's about controlling the world in here, so that so that I don't see myself in that way. I think something that's part of it. I know that's a big part of it.
Yeah. I mean, on one level, I feel like when feelings of anxiety come up, and let's say it's, I don't know, it could manifest as anger at a situation or negativity, or maybe it's important just to kind of let that feeling fully flourish in some space. Just like let that, just express it, and just maybe amplify it, almost like you're acting. It's like just let that, make it bigger, you know.
You know what? This is what David Hawkins recommends in his book "Letting Go." It was the final book that he published before he passed, and he talks about what we do with feelings. He was a psychiatrist and probably enlightened, and that expression just teaches us to have more of it, and repression makes it, come up somewhere else, and suppression makes us, sick, and or I have those two switched around. And ignorance, will make us live only partially. But that, he says, the problem is not that you're angry. The problem is that you're not angry enough. So you let yourself have the anger, and I'm not sure, I can't remember how he says it, but how I have come to know it is like, feel the sensation of the anger inside of me and pay no attention at all to the story that comes along with it. Because if I get angry, I know who caused the anger. And it's either my father, or you owe me money, or you disrespected me. That maybe is a part of it. But the anger that lives inside of us can't possibly be about that. It's a physical sensation that wants to move through the body so that the body can be free of it. It's anger and fear are survival, part of our survival mechanism, and they were triggered at some point, and they got locked in.
Right, and it wants to be expressed. It's an energy. It's like there's a wave is coming. It wants to just get out, and
it wants the freedom of moving through. And I say that specifically rather than expression, because it's not that I have to scream into a pillow, though sometimes I might. It's not that I have to confront my father, dead or alive. Those would be expressions of it. But it's that energy wants to move through the body so that the system can once again be free and pliant and viable, and able to just naturally have experiences and allow those expressions to move through us. But yeah, absolutely.
It seems, I'm sure some people listening are thinking like, well, isn't there a fine line between sort of destructive allowing it to flow versus positive, and what is the process that makes it one or the other?
For me, it's getting okay. Let's say anger is what we're talking about, because that's one that can be destructive.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I notice that I'm angry because I'm having an uncomfortable feeling, and then I start thinking about somebody or something or some experience. So it's like you ever hear the saying stop, drop, and roll? Like if you
Sure.
catch on fire, that's what you're supposed to do. So
Yeah.
the stop, drop, and roll of this is I stop and say, okay, this is whatever it was triggered by, this is some ancient stress that's being released in me. So I take a breath and feel myself in my body, and then ask myself, where is the sensation in the body? And I'm not saying where is the anger in the body, what's the sensation? And the sensation will be like maybe a tightness in the throat and a roiling in the guts. Sometimes it feels like black snakes swimming around in there. But see, these are sensations, they're not feelings, because feeling immediately triggers a story. And I'm getting in touch with the sensation, so I stay out of the story that my intellect wants to tell me. And then once I get grounded in the body and the sensations in the body and feel my feet on the floor and my butt in the chair, then I just literally come to my senses. Can I feel my feet on the floor? Can I taste the soda that I'm drinking? Can I smell the incense that was burned in this room earlier? Can I hear the sound of my voice and the creak of the chair and the traffic outside and my dog tapping along in the next room? And can I see my surroundings, the play of shadow and light and form and color and a little bit of movement? I just grounded myself in my body and then in my five senses. And in that place, then, rather than it being anger that has to be expressed in a certain way, it becomes part of the tapestry of the energy flow of a moment. And it can move through me without it being destructive for me or anyone else, because the anger is not destructive. The expression of it as if it belongs to someone else is what can be destructive.
So are you talking about kind of grounding yourself to make the story a bit wider? It's like I am here in this moment. I'm not just in this story in my head. Is that like
Let's see.
diffusing it in a way?
Well, yes, and it is diffusing it, but if see, and this is one of the things that mindfulness means to me, is like to know that I am consciousness having a nervous system experience, and the anger is part of my nervous system experience that got locked up somewhere. So it's not, if I even say I'm expanding the story, yes, that's part of it, but even that is still story. Like it's anger about this guy, and it's anger about the world itself, and anger about it may be any or all of those things, but it doesn't do me any good in the moment to know what it's about or where it came from. Rather, to get present to the sensations of it and then grounded in my world. Because, if you look at it from the tantric perspective, consciousness is the underlying truth of life, and this whole world is the fabric of that consciousness woven into a tapestry that's ever growing, ever expanding, ever moving. And tantra actually means, in one translation, a weaving, together like a tapestry. So
Mm.
from that perspective, all of this is just energy. And the anger is just one flavor of the energy that is made up, that this whole experience is made up of. And it's only from my limited experience of individuality with a history that that anger can be assigned to anyone or anything. If I let's say my anger, clearly I've brought up my father a couple of times. let's say I believe my anger comes from my relationship with my father, and some of it was from that. But if I see my life as having been extant before this body comes into existence and after this body falls away, then that's just part of the play and display of this expression. It's not a truth. It's not the truth. It's just the flavor of it in this lifetime, in this moment. And but it doesn't belong to him. Let's say I chose it. Let's say I chose to have him as a father so I could have that experience with him. Now I'm finally at the place where I'm able to have the freedom of those feelings so I can let them be here and just let them be a part of this experience. They're not going to go anywhere. It's just energy moving. Energy can't be created or destroyed. The problem is when I have it locked away as if it's wrong, as if it's bad, as if I'll die if I express it, as if I'll die if I uh, recognize some truth about my relationship with that person. It's the locking away of that. Whereas spiritual work to me is all, not all, but a lot about finding the freedom to allow life to experience itself through me, which involves anger, which involves joy, which involves bliss, which involves sorrow, which involves all those experiences.
So what
I
do you
don't.
think the glue is, though, that holds together your ability to let that flow through you, to let life flow through you without being too caught up in it?
Being grounded in that underlying truth of consciousness and doing the work on a daily basis to allow that to be alive in us as we're having all of our experiences. As I'm having this experience with you, knowing that this is consciousness speaking to consciousness, and that, like, when we started this conversation, I had no idea we were going to go where we are, but this is where we are, and it's a fine place to be, and clearly it's serving some purpose, but it's not my business. It's the business of consciousness, and it's my business to make myself as free and full and alive as an expression of consciousness as I can be, and then engage in the world and see what happens from there. Because from another perspective, we labor under the illusion that we're supposed to know how this is meant to go. Yet I've never been this age, speaking to you at your age, at this time in the world. How could we possibly know how it's supposed to go? It's an adventure. How do we engage in the adventure? By being as free and full and alive as we can be, and knowing that we're here for a reason. And what is that reason? According to the truth of consciousness and the truth of the Veda, that reason is to enliven consciousness in each other, to uplift each other, to shine the light of consciousness from one of us to the other of us and back and forth, together, and to see where that goes. Because from the perspective of consciousness came into this, expressed itself as this world by allowing itself to forget that it was just one thing. And it did that in order to have the joyful experience of remembering the truth of itself, much like Bob Thurman said. So when consciousness comes together with consciousness and says, hello, I know you, you're me over there, namaste, that's the reason for existence. And that at some point, the whole of consciousness remembers its oneness with itself, and the singularity occurs, and it all collapses, and then it starts back around. But the play and display of that joyful experience of consciousness is what we're meant to be engaged in. And to what degree on a daily basis in a given situation am I able to let myself be a part of that?
And I suppose, this word practice or some form of ritual, whatever it is for you, they're methods of remembering, from day to day. Because without something some practice. It could be exercise, it could be music, creativity, meditation, whatever it is. It allows you to remember, because that does seem to be a piece of the pie here, that it takes a kind of ongoing process. It
Yeah.
is an endless blossoming. It's not an arrival. It's not even a discovery as much as like an ongoing falling back into, in a way.
It's a point well taken, and it's absolutely the truth that it requires not constant self-consciousness, but constant repeated awareness of our self assessment. And whenever I think I've got it, I know I'm in trouble. That's one thing. And for me, I have found it necessary to listen to or read something on a daily basis that reminds me of these eternal truths, and that allows me some small measure of alignment with something other than my small needs. And so that's essential. And then to practice, and here's where practice of mindfulness is so valuable to me. And I haven't done a formal study of mindfulness, so this may not the mindful experts might disabuse me of the notion that that's what I'm practicing here. But noticing constantly to what degree I'm engaged with the world and to what degree I'm engaged with my thinking about the world. To what degree am I listening to you, and to what degree am I listening to my thoughts about you, or my thoughts about your thoughts about me?
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that I'm having thoughts about what you're thinking about what I'm saying, or thoughts about what I'm going to say as soon as you stop talking, to that extent, I'm not engaged with you, and I'm keeping myself out of life, and I'm keeping us from having the experience we could have with each other. So I make it a practice to let go and come back, and let go and come back, and let go and come back, and listen to the world as fully as possible whenever it occurs to me that I'm not.
I think that sums it up. I mean, let go, come back, and listen to the world. What more is there?
That's yeah. We should make T-shirts. That's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. And so you have a podcast, and I believe you have a daily email that goes out. You have meditations out there. You're an artist as well, so you have a lot of different things. Do you feel is this all because it's just expressions from you that just naturally, like, I want to just do this and I don't want to stop what wants to come out? Or is there some kind of thought process behind the diaspora of your creativity?
There's no overarching thought process. I was so locked down and locked away for so long, and I just struggling to find a way to be present and to express. And the first place I really found that capacity to express was in acting. And I was able to, it mattered enough to me to dig down deeply into the places of locked away feelings. And so that was the beginnings of my tasting freedom. But then what I was expressing was just, I played a lot of really dark characters. And then as you start allowing that stuff to come up, then you have to find psychological and spiritual ways of making sense of those places. And so then and writing has always been a part of that for me, making sense of my own experience, and studying people that have gone before me and writing about what they say that makes sense to me, and finding the way that it processes through me. So, And then meditation was such a vital part of me really getting grounded in what life is meant to be. So, these things just sort of started weaving together. And, as an actor, that's still the thing that turns me on more than anything else. I consistently get to the place where I go like, yeah, I don't really need to act anymore. I've had those experiences. And then I get a job and I go like, man, I love this, because I find just freedom and grace and delight there, because it's like, what's going to come out next? And just let's watch, and let's really challenge everyone and see where it goes. That's amazing that you get an opportunity to do that. But even the really successful actors only work, part of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So, then I became a teacher because my meditation teacher told me to become a teacher. And I said, no, man, I want to be an actor. And he said, you already know too much. You should learn what it is you're actually talking about. And so I became that and, started doing both. And then I, and writing along with it and offering this daily email just as an experiment. I did it for a year, and that was 12 years ago, and I'm still doing it.
That's so wild.
And that turned into a book, which turned into a podcast. And then along the way, I just, for all the time that I was locked away in myself, everything was so intellectualized that at a certain point I started painting and taking photographs, because I wanted to find a way of expression that was other than words. I wanted to go
Yeah.
And so then I ended up, stumbling across this old technique of tintype photography. And so I this from 1852. So I have a studio here, and I do this thing where it's like alchemy. You mix all these chemicals together and then make a picture, and there's about 1,000 different ways of screwing it up. And I go through all of them, and it's
Sounds like life.
Yeah, it's much like life, except it doesn't. It's not quite as onerous when you just destroy a plate. So they all just keep. And I'm just now actually looking at everything and going like, okay, where does this all fit? And I don't know if I'll come up with an idea about that, but I'm, kind of asking where does it all fit, and what do I want to do with it? And, where does it go from here? And maybe that's a question that I should have been asking myself a long time ago, but I've been too busy just doing.
Well, at the end of the day, it's just consciousness expressing itself. So, I mean, it'd be amazing if like you die and you're a soul and you're like, oh man, I broke that plate. Oh well, let's do it again.
You're not going to care. That's absolutely right.
Kind of like when you break a plate, there's a moment of like, oh, bummer. And you're like,
it's just a plate.
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Well, how can folks dive into all this stuff?
JeffKober.com.
Okay.
And there's and Embracing Bliss is the podcast and the book, available where podcasts and books are available. And it's the name of those things, and it's a good idea on a daily basis to think about embracing. So why not?
We will put that in the show notes so people can just go down there and click on it.
Beautiful.
And
thanks.
Thank you for passing the bliss back and forth. It's great to finally be able to connect, and thank you again for your patience in doing so.
What a pleasure to get to meet you, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Jeff, for coming on the show. Really a joy to meet you and to talk, and I look forward to doing it again soon. This song you're hearing in the background is called Four Senses, and it's from the album Love Bomb, and it features a sample of my grandmother when she was in her 90s and lamenting that she couldn't hear music anymore. And this is a song that I've been playing around with, playing in this tour, And I've done this with I'm trying to play a lot of things I've never played before, or sort of use them as a starting place to improvise and riff off them. So if you want to come to the tour, it's happening now, November 1st through 20th in the western mountain and coast of the United States. eastforest.org for tickets. Thank you so much for all the support for everyone out there who has bought a ticket, and I can't wait to see you in these cities as we're rolling through town. All right, you guys keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do, you know what to do. Do it with grace.
When I try to